Hello, you're listening to Sending the Experts with Georgina Durrant. This podcast is all about teaching and supporting children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, SEND. My name is Georgina Durrant. I'm the host of this podcast brought to you by Twinkle SEND. As a former teacher in SENDCO myself, I wanted to create a platform to share some of the amazing things that my guests are doing to support learners with SEND. So whether you're listening on your commute, tuning in whilst walking your dog, or curled up on the sofa with a nice cup of coffee, thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, I am delighted to be joined by Frances Akinde. Frances is a former head teacher of a secondary special school for autistic learners and associated difficulties and a qualified SENDCO. Over the last 20 years, she has worked in various roles across primary, secondary, special, alternative provision and local authority, from an art design technology teacher to a speech language communication needs advisory teacher, liaising with speech language therapists across the local authority. She has now returned to local authority work as a SEND inspector and advisor, a role that she does part-time whilst managing her consultancy service. She's a very busy lady. Hello.
Yeah, I am. Morning. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on. So we know a little bit about your background because I've just said it, but tell us about yourself, your background. Why are you so passionate about working with children with special educational needs and disabilities?
Oh, well, I am a mother of 5 boys, and I started having my children early. And once I started, I was like, I might as well carry on. But I didn't realize that I was doing my teacher training. So I had my eldest son, and then I decided to train as a teacher. I started my teacher training, not knowing that I was pregnant with twins. And everyone's like, who does that? And I'm like, well, I do. So I started my teacher training. I had my twins and they were brilliant. I did it at the Institute of Education in London. And I did it over 2 years, obviously having the twins. I just used to stay up all night getting my essays done while they were sleeping, because I was just so passionate about art initially. Art is the thing that I would say got me through school. And has got me through life. So I do regular art therapy now, and it's really important to me. So I was just like, I'm really passionate about it. I had no desire to be a teacher whatsoever. And when I was at uni, I was going to be a travel photographer and travel around the world, and just live a nice life. That was the dream. And then I had a tutor that said to me, you're so passionate about art, you should be an art teacher. And that was the first time someone said to me, you know what, you'd be good at teaching. So I started in mainstream education, absolutely loved it. I became head of department within my first year as an NQT, which was exactly.
Throw you in at the deep end.
Yeah, exactly, right in the deep end. But I just thrived in that role. And I kind of got to, I don't know what it was. Well, I do know what it was. I've got ADHD and dyslexia. But at the time, I had no idea. I just thought these children that are really struggling in education, that are really finding it difficult, seem to really enjoy art and seem to be getting something out of it. So I started working in alternative provision. So I worked in a PRU for 7 years as a assessment lead, SENDCO, and as an art teacher. And it was just such a great experience. And I just slowly got more and more into working in SEN, to the point where I became a head teacher of a secondary special school for learners with autism, associated difficulties and mental health difficulties as well. And it just became a passion. I think for me, having my children, I started to recognize that they had their own needs.
Yeah.
And it was a real fight against the system. One of my twins, I was told when he was 5, he's really struggling with reading. And I'm like, he's 5.
Yeah.
Just leave him alone, and he was really outdoors. All my boys are really outdoorsy kind of boys, they love just playing football, all that kind of stuff. And I recognized that if I didn't start learning about SEN myself, then nobody would take me seriously as a parent, and nobody would listen to my concerns about my children. So that's what I did.
Wow.
And it was for my own children. And I thought, well, you know what? I've managed to advocate for my own children. I've got 3 of them at university now, I've managed to get them through the system. I thought, well, I need to do that for other people's children, because there are so many people that don't know the system, don't know what's going on in education. And I thought, well, I need to be their advocate, really. So, yeah, that's why I started getting really passionate about it. And that's why I'm still there. So.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. I love that you thought, how can I help? And I'll just make myself super qualified in the area, and then I can be the best person to support them.
Exactly.
I love
exactly.
that.
Then no one can say anything to me,
Yeah, Absolutely. So you work or you have worked as a local authority SEND advisor and inspector.
Yeah.
What are you noticing are the common strengths and weaknesses in schools like SEND provision?
Oh gosh, when you go to a school that is getting it right, it is just lovely. It's so inclusive. It's nothing about these children or doing something that's an add-on. It's like this
Yeah.
is what all our children need. This is what all our children deserve. And you can see that throughout the whole system. You can see that a head teacher is driven by making sure every child gets exactly what they need rather than their own egos. And
Yeah.
that's really clear when you can see that people can say to them, you know, we need to do this, we need to do that. And you can see that it's a whole team. I work across a massive local authority, and sometimes I go into a school and I'm really fortunate because I go into secure provisions, I go into mental health hospitals, I go into, you know, mainstream schools and specialist settings. And really, I love my role because it's just magpieing. That's literally all
Yeah.
it is. You're going into one school, you're seeing something outstanding, and you're sharing that with another school, and
That's
you're
brilliant.
building up like a network of specialist practice, which is just so good. So when I go into a school and the head teacher and a SENCO just get it, it's just an amazing feeling when they just you can see them just writing down everything that you're saying. It's a great idea that will really work, and then they contact you and say that really worked for that child. Thank you very much. Those are the nicest moments
Oh,
for me.
yeah. I bet you feel, like that impact you can have as a teacher, but on a larger
Yeah.
scale almost because
Oh,
it's like school
absolutely.
wide. So you probably feel like you're even having a
Exactly.
bigger impact than that.
Oh, it's that is exactly it. You know, I just did our conference for our Senkos. It was supposed to be 150. Some people snuck in. It was like 167 people there, you know.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
thinking, this day, I've designed the day, I've decided what we're going to be talking about. I've got all these people here who are going to go back to their schools and share what they've learned, you know, and that's going to be
Yeah.
a massive influence on their whole school community. And that's such a great feeling.
Oh, that's brilliant. Talking of people who've snuck in, I actually snuck into there was a local authority SENCO network thing near me the other day, and I was like, "Can I come along? I'm not SENCO anymore, but can I just sneak in?" So I know those people.
It's so important to network, isn't it? And just have
Absolutely.
that opportunity to talk to people that just get it, you know? So,
Yeah, and just like to
yeah,
sit there and absorb some more information from somebody and just get some more CPD. I sat in on one on speech and language, and it was brilliant.
yeah,
It was really neuroaffirming, and it was just a
yeah,
brilliant talk that this lady did about speech and language. And I was just like, oh, I'm really glad I came to this. And then someone put
yeah.
up the hand and asked a really good question about something I hadn't thought, and I was just like, yeah, this is great.
It's so interesting because I also run the primary SENCO network. So we have about 60 SENCOs that come to that. And
Yeah,
it's a 2 hour meeting every term. And I just want it to be an opportunity for them to talk to each other again, you know, to share what's going on in the challenges they're facing. There's so many challenges, you know.
yeah,
But also we're doing a SENCO building confidence course as well.
yeah,
And I like that because it's face to face. They've got like a morning out of school every term or every couple of weeks. Our next one's next week, actually. And it's just an opportunity for them to talk to each other and
yeah,
share that good practice. So I really like the fact that we've got all these opportunities for people to get together because it's such a lonely job, isn't
yeah,
it? Being a
absolutely.
Senko. You
Yeah.
know, it's like everything's your fault. Just like being a mother.
Like being a
Everything.
mum, but like, yeah, on a larger scale.
Yeah, exactly. You've got all these children you're trying to look after. You're trying to get them the best that they can get. And
Yeah.
then you're being told, no, you can't have that. No, we have to prioritize that. No, we can't do this, can't do that. And you just think, and then parents think that it's you,
Yeah,
you know,
because you're
just like,
the
I'm
the scapegoat, the
trying.
one in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. All the time. So yeah, I love my job at the moment. It's just like the balance that I get at the moment is just lovely. You know, I get to work on a wider scale, but then I also get asked by individual schools to come in and support them, which is really
Oh,
lovely as
very
well. So
lovely.
perfect balance.
Yeah, it sounds really good. I also read, you seem to do everything. I also read that you were on the board of the Beyond Ofsted inquiry. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that's an
yeah.
interesting one. So what changes are most needed in the way schools are inspected then? Have you got any
Oh
ideas?
gosh, it was so interesting because I wasn't initially on it. And this is the thing that I find a lot that sometimes people will have a look around the room and think, oh, it's not very diverse. We need to ask other people to come along. And I love people that are that reflective and say, actually, we need to do better. So
Yeah.
I wasn't in the first couple of meetings, and then they were looking for somebody that was a SEND expert, a tick, that's me, who had lived experience, tick, that's me, and who was diverse, so tick,
Yeah.
that was me, you know. So then I went along, and I think it was interesting because we had this focus on academization, and every school has to be within an academy. And I'm coming from a local authority point of view, saying, no, actually, all schools need to work together. There's too much division in education at the moment. There's too much about parents want this and schools can't do this and academies want this. From my point of view, I was thinking, what can we do to make sure schools are fully inclusive? And how can that be demonstrated in their Ofsted outcomes? I think it depends on the Ofsted inspector you get, to be honest. If you get an
Yeah,
Ofsted
heard a lot.
inspector who's an SEN specialist, they really know what they're looking for. If you get an inspector that isn't, literally they might walk into a special school and go, oh, those children, you know, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
being really unprofessional, but it is literally like they don't know what that should look like, you know,
Yeah.
so they just have to rely on the paperwork and what they're being told. For me, safeguarding is a massive area that I think we're just not getting right. How can it be that a school gets an inspection sometimes 4, 5, 6 years after they've been rated outstanding,
Yeah.
and in that time you're checking safeguarding as well? You know,
Mhm.
I think there should be a separate body for safeguarding, and that was one of the recommendations that I was really passionate about, that in terms of safeguarding there should be a check, but also there should be support, you know. So in the way that I work with my inspections in my local authority is schools actually get 2 visits a year. So they
Mhm.
get a full inspection in the same way that they would do an Ofsted inspection, but then they also get a half-day inspection every year to see how they're getting on with their targets. And those targets are things that they've expressed they're having challenges with and things that they've asked for extra support with.
Yeah.
To me, that's what Ofsted should look like.
Yeah,
You
working
know,
with
that's
you.
exactly, not this pressure of, oh my gosh, the inspectors are coming. We're here to help. That's
Yeah.
what it should be about. So I think in terms of the model going forward, that's exactly what it should be. It should be a supportive, not a punitive kind of system where we're working together for the good of the child in the
Absolutely.
middle, you
Yeah.
know, and these incentives we've got at the moment where we've got suspensions through the roof,
Mhm.
attendance is just, you know, it's not good at all. But schools have got an incentive to say, right, okay, we need to move that child on. You know, proofs are
Mm.
full.
Yeah.
Why isn't the incentive that, you know, this is locus parentis, these are all your children.
Mhm.
As a parent, what would you do to ensure that child had everything that they needed to get a good education and to have a positive life? You know,
Yeah.
to me, that's what it's all about. So how can we make schools more accountable, you know, through our inspection process to ensure that they're fully inclusive? You know,
Yeah.
to me, that's it.
Oh,
So
I'm glad you're on the board because those are brilliant suggestions and brilliant things that need to be put forward,
yeah,
definitely.
needs to
Um,
happen.
so you yourself have ADHD and dyslexia, you touched on it a
Yeah,
little bit. Do you mind telling us when you were diagnosed and like what led you to get assessed? Because I believe from
yeah.
researching you, from a little bit of Googling, that it wasn't something you were aware of as a child.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting because I've met a lot of women who got diagnosed really late. Normally, when they're going through the menopause or they're premenopausal and they're trying to understand themselves. I've had a lifetime of not feeling like I fitted in for one
Yeah.
reason or another and just thinking, what is going on with my brain? When someone says, oh, can you get that report done? And they're sitting there doing it and they finished it in 2 hours. And I'm like, why is this taking me a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I still haven't got it done, you know? And it got to the point when I was leaving headship. What happened was I was initially diagnosed with a vestibular condition called Meniere's,
Yeah.
and that made me lose my hearing in my left ear. And I started getting vertigo, I started getting really dizzy, things like that. But as a head teacher, I was like, I took I think 2 or 3 days off, then I was back in work.
Oh,
But then it was just like overwhelming.
oh,
Everything became too much. And I was looking up, you know, Meniere's, and it was actually one of my receptionists that said, oh, have you heard of a condition called Meniere's? And then when I looked it up, it said, oh, it's connected to if you've had meningitis as a baby or when you're younger. And I
oh,
had meningitis when I was a toddler, about 2.5. but I had no idea of the long-term difficulties associated with it. Then they said there was a link between meningitis and ADHD. And I was like, oh, it was all these things. I'd spent my whole career thinking about other people's children, other people, and saying, oh, maybe we should look at this and that, and not focusing on myself. So I went down the route. Luckily for me, I could, not that I could afford it, but I just put it all on my credit card because I was just like, if I don't get an understanding of what's going on for me, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, because I was feeling quite low at the time. And like my whole world was changing, and what am I going to do for the future and everything else. So I managed to pay for a private diagnosis, and they diagnosed me with ADHD. And then they said, oh, you should look into dyslexia. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not dyslexic. I mean, I was shocked I had ADHD anyway. Now I'm like, it's completely clear.
No, it makes sense.
It's very obvious. And then she said, have a look at dyslexia. So I went for another assessment for dyslexia, and I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And then after I went for my diagnosis with dyslexia, they said, oh, maybe you should look at this, and maybe you should look at that. And I was like, you know what, I'm done.
I've got
let's
enough.
let's just say I have a hearing impairment, I have a disability, I'm neurodivergent, that's
Yeah,
it,
don't need to know
And I
anything.
think what made that really interesting for me is that I thought, well, in schools, this is what we do. From our own experiences, we say, oh, maybe this child's dyslexic, and we go down that pathway, or maybe this child's got ADHD, or maybe this child's got autism. There isn't a pathway where we can just say, this child is neurodivergent. Let's have a look at what that might be and look at what's going on,
Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting for me now to say to people, don't just dismiss something or other. Like, let's look at the whole picture and see what's going on for this child. So,
That's
yeah.
such a good point. I know parents who've gone for assessments for one thing and they've said, oh, either found out the child's autistic, and then they've been told to then start the process again to look for
Yeah,
ADHD or something. And it doesn't make sense, really, does
it
it?
doesn't.
Like you say,
It
it
doesn't
should be
make
all in
sense.
one.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting to me is that Amanda Kirby did the Do It profiler, and when it first came out and she was asking people to trial it, she was doing it for free. So I was like, oh, brilliant. This was back in 2019, around October 2019. So I got the profiler and I did it, and it said traits of dyslexia, ADHD, and autism. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I was saying to people about it and things like that, never going for a full diagnosis. It was just something I kind of
Yeah,
put in the
yeah,
back of my mind. And then when I was going through my diagnosis, it was spot on.
yeah.
And I know there's lots of arguments at the moment around using the Do It profile and what that looks like as a blanket assessment. But I think as an initial assessment, it's really, really powerful, because it's not just looking at, this deficit of what's wrong. It's looking at those strengths and looking at what is it that we can say this child or this adult is really good at? How can they use their strengths to support them
Yeah.
with their challenges? So, yeah, I found that really interesting. I think it's a massive help for SENDCOs. But part of that is I'm really interested in AI, and I'm really interested
How
in
are
this
you? Cool. I
technology.
feel like
Oh
AI
gosh,
is
I love
jumping
it.
ahead of me. I feel like I want to be interested. Like I think it's cool, but
Yeah,
there's so many people that have suddenly become good at it, and I'm like, how did that happen? It's
yeah,
only
yeah.
new.
And the thing is, there's no way to get good at it. It's just AI. So
Yeah,
it's literally just knowing the right apps and things to use. And I think with
exactly.
AI, we are looking at things that are going to able to help us with diagnosis, where you can put in, I mean, I can go on ChatGPT, put in a overview of a child or an adult and say, this child has got this, and that, this is what they struggle with. And it will give me strategies. To me, that's better than an SEN admin caseworker who has no experience of SEN thinking, oh, let me just see what that on that child's EHCP and copy it over to that child's
Yeah.
EHCP. And they haven't got that experience. They're not SENCOs. I mean, some of them are, so I don't want to be
Yeah,
disparaging,
no,
but
I get.
a lot of them aren't. So why can't we use technology? Why can't we use
Yeah.
AI to support in a really bespoke way for that individual? I think it's revolutionary. And I think in education, we are back in a couple of centuries ago and not forward thinking enough, and it will save us so much work,
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Can you imagine? I had no idea it could do that.
Yeah,
That would be
yeah,
brilliant, wouldn't it?
yeah.
And
Try it
then you
out
can use
after
the
this
strategies at
podcast.
work. Yeah, it's like giving you just some ideas. It doesn't mean you have
Yeah,
to, that is what you decide to do, but it gives you some ideas of what
exactly,
you could try. That's brilliant.
exactly,
It'll
exactly.
do
And
us out
it's
of a
things
job
like,
though.
Yeah, the thing is, I always see it as, I think people are worried about machines taking over. And one of my sons loves Doctor Who, and there was an episode where it was like the machines had taken over. There was nothing that anybody
Oh
could do. And I
no.
was like, this is why we need to be careful with it and think, right, we've got to program AI so that it doesn't take over in the future. Otherwise, we're all stuff. But I think for me, it's thinking, how can it help me work more efficiently, more
Yeah,
effectively? And especially with my challenges, if when I'm report writing, I have to use Grammarly, I have to use, Quillbot, I have to use all these things to make sure that my report is accurate. I can do a bit of research using Bing. And rather than me having to call through the internet, it will give me a bespoke answer around something that I'm looking for. Now,
yeah.
for someone with ADHD, sometimes it's just allowing me to get started. So it's like my brain's frozen,
Yeah.
and it's like I just can't get started.
Sort
But
of
once I
blank
get,
paper syndrome, where you see the blank
yeah,
piece of paper and like, what am I supposed to do?
exactly. But once I get that initial thought, then it just flows. And then
Yeah.
I'm in deep focus about something. Using AI allows me to do that. Even using Bing as a search engine, because it's using AI, just allows me to get started and start like generating ideas. I would never have imagined, even a year ago, that I'd be sitting here saying, I've just finished writing a 45,000 word book that's going to be published, in September, because I was able to use technology to help me write. Grammarly, my gosh, I've not got a clue about grammar. When you read the book, you'll find out I have no clue about grammar, but I have the ideas, and I
Yeah.
have the support to help me structure that book in a way that other people will be able to understand what I'm trying to talk about. I can't imagine I could have done any of that even 2, 3 years ago. So it's been revolutionary for me.
And does it change now? You know you're neurodivergent and you know you work in a different way and you've got these
Yeah.
strategies that you use yourself. Has that sort of fed into your work with children? Has it like made you
Oh,
think differently in the way you
absolutely.
support them?
Yeah, it's really interesting. If I go to a school and they may not be as inclusive as they need to be, and they say to me, I mean, look at him, he's clearly got ADHD. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because so have I. And then the conversation changes,
Yeah,
because
no
it's
longer
like they've
deficit. It's got to be positive because they
exactly,
can't say that to you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to me to talk about it because,
Yeah.
sometimes children in school, they've not got the support they need. And it's simple things like, they might say, oh, he's not paying attention. He's always staring out the window. And I'll do a session with a child and I'll say, well, what are you staring at? What's so interesting? Say, oh, I can see the lorries going past and I really want to be a lorry driver. And it's really interesting, and it's things like that. And you say,
Yeah.
use that in the classroom. I remember once I went to see a boy when I was a speech and language advisory teacher. I went to see a boy. They said he's not paying any attention in the classroom. When I spoke to him, the head teacher at the time was brilliant. He used to be the coach for the school football team. He used to play football with the kids at break time. This was like a mainstream primary school. But the school used to sometimes say, well, if you're not behaving in this, you're not going to football. And I said, that's exactly the
Ah,
wrong
that's the thing
thing,
you
or you're not going out to
Yeah.
break. And I just
Oh,
thought
don't get me
he
started on that.
needs that time to regulate himself. And I remember saying to the teacher, said, oh, he's not paying attention. And all he's thinking about is football. Why don't you mention football? And I remember, I'll never forget. So I was observing a maths lesson, and I won't get this right because I know nothing about maths. But he was like head down, not paying attention, just like doing the usual. And she said, so let's think about the circumference. And she said, or the area, whatever it was. And she said, so like, if we're looking at a football pitch, how do we work out? Honestly, it was like
I'm in.
straight away. Exactly. And he was paying attention. And I remember afterwards, she was saying, I couldn't believe that. And I
Yeah.
said, I told you, it's just thinking about what is he interested in. My trigger word is art. If you say art to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, 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 yeah. And I can
Yeah.
flow for hours about it. And it's just thinking, what is it that works for that individual
Yeah.
child?
And
What is their
often
interest?
it's often easier as well when you're not in it. Do you know what I mean? When you're watching from afar and you're seeing it, you can bring strategies to it. There was a parent was talking to me about a kid, no, a teacher was talking to me about a kid in her class who was, I think probably got ADHD, was struggling to sit down, always wanted to move around. She was like, I don't know how to get him to sit still in the lesson. And I was like, why don't you get him to move? And she was like, what do you mean get him
Exactly.
to move? I was like, well, if he wants to move, why don't you get him to move? And then he'll find it easier.
Yeah.
I was like, get him to hand the books out, get him to be in
Yeah.
charge of this,
Yeah.
give him
Yeah.
some like proper movement activities that are like
Yeah.
appropriate. And she said it
Yeah.
worked. And I was like, yay. But it's
It's so true. So true. I mean, one of my
easier from
sons,
my point of view than it is from hers because she's there
yeah,
every day with the same children. But
exactly.
when you were looking,
Exactly.
yeah, looking in, it's easier.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it's changing that narrative.
Mm,
It's thinking about that child who's got ADHD, won't sit still, disrupting the lessons, doing this, doing that. Why aren't you giving them some of the content in advance? Why
yeah.
aren't you giving them the keywords? It's like simple things like that. I went to a school yesterday, I was talking to the head teacher, and he was like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And my face can't lie. I was like, that's basics, And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I know you think it's revolutionary, but it's really not. It's basic. That's what you should be doing for everyone. And we were laughing about it. But it's like, if you don't know, you don't know. And when you do know, you do better. It's
Yeah.
just like thinking about what is it? How can I just change the narrative that I've got in my head about this child? There
Yeah.
was a lovely post on LinkedIn yesterday by someone talking about their son, and he said that his son had got to the point where he was just like, didn't know what he was going to do in life. He was getting in trouble all the time. And I mean, obviously, he had the money to do it, but he sent him to Thailand, gave him some money, said, right, go and discover yourself. And he got this email from his boss. He'd managed to find a job in Thailand, and he got an email from his boss saying, we looked behind this facade that he was giving us and like looked at what his difficulties were and how to help him with that. And he's absolutely thriving. And that is what I wish everybody would do
Yeah.
for every single child. Look behind those behaviors and think, where is this coming from? What's going on? How can we support them with all the stuff that's going on internally and in the background so that they can thrive in school, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be your answer to my next question, which was how can schools be more inclusive of neurodivergent learners and the changes they can make that have the biggest impact? So I'm guessing that's probably what you've
Yeah.
just said.
Honestly, I know it sounds really simple, but I'm very, very values driven. And, looking at character and values is really important to me. It's being kind, it's
Yeah.
being caring, it's just showing everybody that you care about them. And ultimately, again, I say parental, that locus parentis.
Yeah.
In the place of a parent, what does that look like for you as an educator? If that was your own child, your nephew, your niece, whatever that is, what would you want them to have for them to thrive in school? I think from my experience, I was fostered when I was younger.
Wow.
So my experiences of family is completely different. I
Yeah.
spent all week in a really nice home, with other children that weren't my brothers and sisters, but they were my family. We looked
Yeah.
after each other. Nobody could mess with us. We looked after each other, you know,
Yeah.
because we had to, because it makes you more vulnerable when people think, well, they haven't got their parents
Yeah.
around. And to me, that's how I've always been. But that's what has made me, I think, quite open to manipulation around certain things, quite vulnerable around certain areas, because I genuinely just care about people. I genuinely want to see people thrive. I genuinely want to make sure that every child and every adult that I support basically has a good life. And
Yeah.
it's just natural to me. And people think there's a hidden agenda because I think neurotypical people typically are used to maneuvering in a different way. When you're
Yeah.
neurodivergent, it's just like, well, that's how it is. Like, you don't have the time to be manipulative or conniving or whatever it is. Who has the energy
Yeah.
and who has the energy to have that thought process to think, oh, I've got to do this and then I've got to do that, and that will lead to that.
But I
Who's
do
got the
complicated.
time?
Just be nice.
Exactly. So
So
it's just that, yeah.
yeah, no, that's really interesting. You mentioned adults as well. So if we're thinking of
Yeah.
like neurodivergent colleagues in schools, you've shared tips with Twinkle previously on supporting neurodivergent colleagues in school. In your
Yeah.
experience, are schools inclusive places to work if you're neurodivergent?
No.
No, I thought you were going to say that. So what can we do? How can we make them better? If there's a head teacher listening now thinking, that's something I don't do or haven't thought about
Yeah,
properly,
yeah,
what
yeah.
can they do?
Acknowledge that not everybody's brains work the same way as yours,
Yeah,
and to think that just because you think something's simple doesn't mean other people will. What
yeah,
is it that staff are telling you? What do they need? For example, I always tried to give 2 weeks for reports or, if I needed information, because that's what I'd need, but because I'm neurodivergent, I know, even when I didn't have a diagnosis, I know, right, this is the way my brain works. I need extra time for this. It's listening to staff and asking them, I have people now who have said to me, because I trained as a workplace assessment, adjustments assessor,
Oh, cool.
because I just thought, what would it be that I needed? Everything that I needed that I didn't get, that's what I try and give to other
Yeah.
people. And people might say to me, I'm really struggling at work because I'm expected to do this and I'm expected that. I'm like, go and speak to your head teacher and say to them, you're really struggling in that area. You need support, and tell them what that support looks like. I really like the idea of a strengths-based profile for children and adults where you can say, these are my challenges, but these are my strengths. And you know yourself. And sometimes people need that help to get that out as well. But what is that profile? What does that look like? And one of the nicest things that I always encourage everyone to do is just to do a one-page visual profile all about yourself
Yeah.
and think about what is it that somebody likes doing, what are those connections that I can make with people. And people know me, I'm a massive Arsenal fan. On my visual profile, there'd
Mhm.
be the Arsenal shield. And people would talk to me about it and say, oh, that game last night, or that was rubbish. Making those connections, getting to know people is
Yeah.
really important. So you can know the way they work. In some schools, they do it so well where the head teacher, their first job is to meet with every member of staff, get to know them on a personal level. And it might take you all term, but
Yeah.
the difference it makes to somebody to know, this person understands me, they understand my challenges. They don't just see me as a body
Yeah.
for someone to make sure their health and safety ratios are right. They're getting to know me personally. And that's what I would encourage every head teacher to do, is just to be personal with people and
Yeah.
just get to know them and talk to them and find out what their needs are. For me, it was really difficult being in an academy group, that there were some things that I wanted to do that I couldn't implement.
Mhm.
And I found that really difficult. And that change needs to come from the top. I think in terms of the government and looking at disability, there needs to be something around, disability passports, asking people from the beginning, what is it that we need to put in place to help you thrive? And
Yeah.
there are so many organizations, that are looking at disability passports, and unions saying, we need to do this from the beginning so people feel prouder. Why are we not seeing so many teachers that are wheelchair users, that are visually impaired, that are hearing impaired, who are talking about their ADHD, talking about their dyslexia, the difference that makes in the classroom when you've got a child who
Mm.
is, I went to school the other day and to approve, we call them education centres. And this child was like, well, it's my ADHD. I haven't had my medication. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I was like, I've got ADHD. I'm not medicated. And they were just like, you could see they were annoyed because they wanted to say, well, I can't do this. I can't do that. And I said to them, well, have you thought about your diet? What did you have last night, McDonald's? I said, think about that. Think about drinking. Think about all those alternatives. It was just that connect, and the whole conversation changed. Once they
Yeah.
knew that I understood, that's what we need in the classroom. When you've got a teacher in front of you that's talking about their ADHD and you're a child with ADHD, instantly you're like, my gosh, I can do that.
Yeah.
It completely changes the narrative. Why wouldn't we want that in our schools? If we're saying we want our schools to be more inclusive, why are we not allowing our teachers to talk about their challenges, talk about their mental health
Yeah.
difficulties, and how they support themselves? It just doesn't make sense to me, but I'm neurodivergent. So it's like some things that make sense to
It
me.
feels
You're
it's
like,
like a missed opportunity, isn't it? Yeah, and it
absolutely.
could really help. And children learn from us modeling things and us doing things, and learn
Yeah,
from us more than what we teach them. They probably learn from watching us more. So
exactly.
I take it you're a fan of Neurodiversity Celebration Week then.
Yes,
What does
absolutely.
it
Yeah.
mean to you as a neurodivergent educator?
I think for me, I'm so glad I'm able to connect with other people that celebrate their strengths and talk about their challenges. It was something that when I first discovered it, I just thought, wow, this is so positive. This is so supportive, talking about what we do well. you know, and that's so important to me. I think I take it in the same way as Black History Month, where it's like we shouldn't need 1 week or 1 month to think about something, to put something in the spotlight. I did an article for Schools Week about celebration weeks. My gosh, October, I think it had more
Oh, October,
celebration
don't get us
days.
started, honestly, at Twinkle. October is the most stressful time. And there's a half term, and it's like, we've got all of these weeks all in one.
Exactly. It's
We have
like,
a joke that if someone says, oh, when's so-and-so celebration week, we just go October.
exactly. Everything's in October,
Yeah,
just like let's stick it in October.
spread it
But it's
out.
things like Fresh Air Day, National Pie Day, Mash Day, Meat Day, Pork Day, whatever it is. And you're just like, wow, all these things you have to think about all different people and what that means to them, you know. So I wish we didn't need it, if I'm honest with you. I wish that it was just something that we celebrated day in, day out. But we're not there yet. And because we're not there yet, we need more people to be making noise about it. What I love about LinkedIn is that I literally, all I do on search is I put in ADHD or I put in dyslexia or I put in neurodiversity or something like that. And everybody that has that in their hashtags will come up. And then I just follow them or just connect with them or repost what they're saying. And it's such a lovely community. I prefer LinkedIn to Twitter now because Twitter is so literally you say, well, it's a nice day today. No, it's not. How could you say it's a nice day? Oh, you don't like the cold. You don't like this, that. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Quick, turn the comments off.
You know, exactly. Block, mute, quick. You know, it's just so ridiculous. But I like the fact that people are seeing these hashtags about neurodiversity, about celebrating strengths and retweeting it and finding other people. Can you imagine as somebody that felt so different to everybody else and thought, you know, what is going on in my brain? Then you see a post by someone saying, couldn't find my keys and I looked in the fridge and they were there. I was standing in front of the toaster and I could smell the toast burning and the fire alarm was going and I was just looking at it. And then they go ADHD and you're like, that's what I do.
You're getting me questioning myself now. I once, when I was pregnant at work, I was so tired, to be fair, it's probably more sleep deprivation, put the kettle in the fridge. Didn't know what I was trying to make or what I was trying to do. Put it in, shut the door off, and I was like, where's my, oh, I'm going to make my
Exactly.
oh, it's in the fridge.
I can spend all day looking for something because I don't think to myself, I put it where it should be.
Yeah.
So I won't look in the place where it's meant to be and spend all my time. And then I have to get someone else to do that. I did that once with my car keys when I was working up in London. Couldn't find my car keys and I'd put it in a safe space in the front of my bag, obviously. Spent ages. Everybody was looking for it. In the end, I had to call my husband to come up to work with the spare key. Then he had to get the train into work because we had to, it was terrible. I'm so embarrassed actually thinking about it now. But it's things like that that actually is good for me to share
Yeah.
because that's ADHD.
Yeah.
It is you're so focused, and it's not the inattention, and that's what I don't like about it when they say ADHD
Yeah,
is
the
a
inattentive
deficit.
state. Yeah.
It's not. You're looking at everything, you
Yeah.
know, and you're paying attention to everything. I'm on this podcast with you, but now I'm looking at the 2 drinks that I've put next to me to make sure that I drink that I haven't touched. I'm looking at my breakfast in my bag, but because it's in a bag, I haven't taken it out of the bag. I can't see it to think, oh, you need to eat that, you know. I'm looking at the 3 pairs of glasses that I've got because I'm so worried about losing my glasses, but I haven't actually put them on, and I need to wear them. You know, it's things like that. It's paying too much attention
Yeah,
to
you're
everything, so
attending
you can't
more.
focus on one thing. Yeah. I know we were talking about something else, but obviously I went off on
Yeah, I know
something.
that's I've done the same. This is why I write down questions, as we said before we started recording, because otherwise I'll go off on one and people will be like, what was that?
But can you imagine? I'm an inspector, and that's what makes me a great inspector because if someone's trying to take me down one path and say, oh, come and have a look over there, I'm thinking,
Oh, yeah,
actually,
brilliant.
what's over there? You know,
Yeah, and
you
then they're like, time's up.
notice
Oh, we didn't see the
everything.
thing we were looking for. Brilliant.
Exactly. You notice everything, you know,
Yeah.
and then you go off in like a tangent about a child that doesn't look very happy, and you think, oh, tell me more about, you know, that child. What's going on for that child? Why is that child out of the classroom when they're trying to move you on from something? So
Yeah.
it's a really good trait to have. as an inspector, I have to say. The dyslexia, not so much when you're report writing, but the ADHD, definitely.
That's brilliant. I love that. The other thing we were going to talk about was you're interested in the intersection between race and SEND.
Yeah.
We had a podcast with Susie Rowland, I don't know if you've heard it, on a
She's
similar
brilliant.
about it. So what should governments be doing to address issues of discrimination and disadvantage?
Oh gosh, what a big question.
Oh, it is a big question. If you just summarise that in like 5 minutes.
You know what? To me, before it's government, it's unions. And, it's the time of year where unions are talking about their manifestos and their areas of focus for the year ahead. They're very happy to talk about SEND because everyone's talking about SEND. And it's one of those things that can affect everybody, regardless of race, gender, anything. But when it comes to race, it's such a personal experience. Mm-hmm. And when you've been discriminated against, my gosh, it hurts. It hurts so much. And it makes you so passionate about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Yeah. When you haven't got that experience, it's a bit alien to you. Mm-hmm. And I wish people that would listen more to people who've had that lived experience and what that looks like for them. Because you literally feel like you're just trying to live your life. You've got no malice towards anyone. You don't want to do anything towards anyone. You just want to thrive in yourself. Yeah. And then when you've got these constant barriers up and people questioning you and gaslighting you and making you feel like, you're not as good as them for no particular reason, it's so painful. And I think this is why when you see Black educators, they're overqualified.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah, it's so true.
If you look at all the stuff you've done, when you think of me reading out your bio and all the stuff you've done, you are massively qualified and done so much. And you're right.
Yeah. But it's still really hard for us to get a job in the industry that we want to, And I think I got fed up of it a couple of years ago. I just got fed up of it. And I was just like, this needs to change. But then when you go to unions and you say this needs to change, they're very good at the performative part of it and saying, yes, we're for equality, we're for equity. This is what we're doing about anti-racism. When you actually say to them, okay, what are the concrete actions are you doing? Are you putting it in your manifesto that every member of your union has to sign up to anti-racism, to be truly anti-racist? Oh, no, that's going too far. No, we can't do that. Why not? The TUC have said that every union has to be anti-racist. So this is why we see unions putting on measures and things and that. But then when it comes to actually listening to the lived experience of people, they're not making changes around that. So I think we know that unions are the ones that have the power to make change in government. So if we have unions working together, instead of all these separatist things that we've got going on at the moment, working together to make a change in the same way that they did around Ofsted. Look at all this movement we've got around Ofsted. And then the biggest thing that's really affecting people is discrimination in schools. If you look at the stats around Black Caribbean boys in particular, in primary school, they're doing really well, right? They haven't got mental health difficulties, they're achieving. They get to secondary school, something happens within that transition, then all of a sudden they've got mental health difficulties, all of a sudden they've got SEMH, they've got behaviour difficulties. What's changed? The only thing that's changed is people's attitudes towards them, that's looking at this negative bias rather than looking at, how can we help this child thrive? How can we help them develop? And as adults, we have our own bias around people that's telling us, the media are telling us, these children are in gangs, these children are a danger, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And our bias is affecting us in the classroom. We can't say that it's not, but then we say that it's unconscious bias. And that kind of is a get off, oh, it's unconscious, they didn't mean to do it. But actually, you've been told about your bias and you're not doing anything about it.
Unconscious. Yeah, that's a really good point. People do use that, like unconscious bias, and you think, actually, how can it be unconscious bias? You can't not be thinking about it for it to be a bias.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think this is why I wrote my book, because I was thinking about allyship and I was thinking about the things that I wish I'd had, growing up and as an adult with some of the experiences of racism that I've had. So I thought I need to talk about allyship and I need to talk about how we teach children to be allies from a young age. Yeah. So they see that we're not looking at a colourblind society. Well, I don't see colour. Well, I do, because I'm a Black woman, So I am conscious when I go into
Yeah.
spaces. I look around and I think, there's no one here that looks like me. There's no one here that gets how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
So I don't like it when people say we have to be colourblind, we just need to get on with it. Actually, we need to acknowledge people's differences, and we need to challenge ourselves about what that feels for us when we're looking at difference, and how we can learn about other people's experiences. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with talking about that. But I think people are so afraid to say racist or racism, and we go against it. There was actually a report done by the government, the DfE, in 1992 about racism and unconscious bias and discrimination in education. And it was called Getting It Right. And to me, that's fundamentally it. You have to get it first. You have
Yeah.
to understand,
Yeah.
and then you can get it right. Now, this report has been around for what, 40 years? Is that right? 92, 30 years. And we're still not getting it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the fundamental things in the report, it says, how do we talk about discrimination? And it actually says without using the R word, because we're not sure how schools are going to take that. Well, actually, if we look back at safeguarding and we acknowledge the effect racism has on somebody's mental health, and we put it under safeguarding, it's mentioned once under mental health, racism may have an effect on somebody's mental health. Actually, we need to be more explicit than that and put it under a safeguarding concern and say this is something that affects our pupils and we need to do something about it. But until we can get that change, and until we're brave enough to say we need to do something about it, it's not going to change. We've been talking about this for 50, 60, 70
Yeah.
years.
It's such a good point, that get it and then do something about it. So that makes so much more sense, because you're right. A lot of places or schools, or I don't know, lots of places and companies perhaps are doing like the performative thing where they're saying
Yeah.
they're doing lots of stuff, but they're not
Yeah.
actually understanding it first and taking the time.
Exactly.
It's more like we need to be seen to be doing something
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
actually taking it in.
Exactly. And we have all these, the amount of listening exercises I've been asked to go on, where people say, I just want to learn. I just want to learn about your experiences. Read a book, go on ChatGPT, ask them what that feels like. But actually tell me what you're going to do to make a change.
Yeah.
Because it's like every time you ask us, it's like, oh, we're reliving our trauma, we're retelling
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
stories, just for you.
Yeah.
Read a book. There's lots out there that you can read, and then commit to doing something about it. That's true allyship. When you
Yeah.
say, you know what, I need to do something about this. What can I do? And what can I do that doesn't make me feel like, oh, I've got to be careful, because if I get in trouble, if I make too much noise about it, then, oh, something's going to happen to me. Put
Yeah.
your own self aside, because as leaders in schools, as teachers, we're meant to be selfless. We're thinking about other people. What
Yeah.
is it that you can do to make society better for everyone?
Yeah. No,
Rant
absolutely.
over.
No, I liked your rant. And I'm taking it that's why because my next question was about the BAME Ed Send network, and I'm guessing
Yeah,
that's probably your passion behind that and the aim of that network, perhaps.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. When Baymed Network is such an important network to me, because as as you go up the ranks in education, the demographics get narrower and narrower. There are
Yeah.
less people that look like you. As a head teacher, it's something like 0.2% of head teachers are from a Black African background
No
and look like
way.
me. Okay. So,
Wow.
in terms of the statistics around ethnic minorities, it's a little bit higher. But when it's looking at me,
Yeah.
it's like there's not many people that look like me. Now, if you think about how that feels as an educator and that isolation when you're going through
Mm.
experiences, it's so lonely. It's being a head teacher is a lonely enough job anyway.
Yeah.
But then when you bring race and gender into it as well, gosh, it's even worse. So when I discovered the Baymed Network, it was back in 2017, 18, when I was an assistant head. And to walk into a room of educators where you're just like, wow, it
Yay.
was such a diverse
Yeah.
community to belong to. And the talks, and it was like an all-day conference, the talks, the webinars, the seminars and everything was around that experience of being an educator that looked like me and what that looked like in education. So what I found was that, yes, that was progressing really well. And there's like 20,000 people on Twitter and within this network.
Wow.
But then when it comes to SEND, it's such a niche area to be in. And those experts, I couldn't find them. And what was happening is that I'd go to conferences and people, as an afterthought, would say, oh, we haven't got a very diverse lineup. Let's ask Frances, or let's ask Tanisha, or let's ask Audrey, or let's ask this person or that person, Lorraine, or, whoever it was. And it's like, you can ask more than one of us to come to the conference. And now that I've said it, you'll see it for yourself. When you look at a lineup at conferences, it's like, oh, there's one Black woman, tick. And that's it, honestly, it's so stark. So I was like, we need to do something about it. And it was originally Amjad Ali that approached me and said, I'm really thinking about what this looks like. And he started off, we had like a one-off meeting, and people kind of like dropped, people like, yeah, we need to do this. And they dropped to the wayside until it was just me and him left. So now we have like the BayMed Send network. And I try and do termly talks with people where I just invite educators from all different backgrounds onto the talk, just to give like some free CPD to people around issues that are really important. So last time I did it around differentiation. This time I've done it around safeguarding, and then next time I'll probably do it around behaviour. It's nice because I just choose whatever I think is important. Brilliant. But it's so nice that people feel like they've got a community of people that actually understand what that looks like. And I think going on from that, it's thinking about in terms of school leaders, when you're looking at data, when you're looking at demographics, when you're looking at those statistics, analyse them, analyse your suspensions, analyse your sends, analyse your assessments, and think, what children am I putting forward to see the educational psychologist? What children am I looking at and going, that's a behaviour, and not looking at an underlying speech and language or anything else? And having a network of people with that lived experience is changing the narrative for people and making people question and think. And to me, that's the most important thing about BayMed and BayMed Send.
Oh, it sounds brilliant. Well done with it. It sounds fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Right, I need to know links and stuff. And you've mentioned your book. So before you go, tell us a little bit about your book and where people can find you and your website and all of that. And I will put all these links in the show notes below. So if you're watching on YouTube, they will be down here. And if you're listening on, I don't know, whichever podcast provider you're listening on, if you scroll down your phone, you'll be able to find these links. So where are we sending people, Frances?
I love LinkedIn at the moment. So if you just put in my name, Frances Akinde, there's not many Akindes. So if you just put in my name, you'll find me on LinkedIn. I have my own website, Inclusion HT, so you can find me on there. Twitter is a bit harder to find me. So I've kind of like made loads of Twitter accounts saying Frances Akinde Frances, in case I get something happens.
Like backups.
Yeah, my backups, but I don't use them at all. So my Twitter handle is Frankie Tweeter, because I was saying to myself, I actually just need to talk about art.
Yeah.
And then that reminds me, Frances, stop talking about other things, talk about art. And I never do. So it's Frankie Tweeter, and you'll see a Matisse painting called Icarus Rising. That's just my handle. It's a long story, but that's how you find me. It's kind of secret way to find me on Twitter. So just type in my name on Google. I actually have my own Bing AI search results now. And my son told me, Mum, you've made it. If you put your name into Google, like your name comes up. Frances Akinde is a former head teacher. Blah, blah. Like, wow, I've made it. So
myself now and see as well.
Try it when you get off here. Try it. I'm going to put your name in. Then you've made it when you get your own search result.
Oh, thank you so much. You've been such a brilliant guest. I've really enjoyed meeting you. I was so excited to meet you, and it's been lovely.
I can't believe the time's gone already. I can't believe that. Yeah, no, really lovely. And good luck with all your books and everything as well. You're doing brilliant stuff. It's really good to see.
Thank you. Oh, I love her. Isn't she brilliant? Yeah, I feel like we covered a lot of ground there, everything from AI, which I wasn't even expecting to talk about, but I'm really pleased we did, to Neurodiversity Celebration Week and what it meant to her. Make sure you check out the links in the show notes, links to her and links to our Twinkle resources that are relevant for this episode. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thanks. See you next time.